Hello, ladies and gentlemen. Hello, ladies and gentlemen. Are you here? Are you ready? Okay. Achieving social impact in the creative space. Doing good whilst doing business. Why is it important? What is it? Who is going to discuss this with you? Well, ladies and gentlemen, the three experts, panelists have been introduced. So without further ado, let's get straight into it. This is a question I would never be able to ask anyone else. What is it like, Sinmi, to grow as a daughter of Sinmi, Olayebi, in the context of giving back and achieving social impact?
Yeah, that's a fun question. So I think naturally, obviously being her child, Femi Olayebi's child. So for people who don't know, she's the convener of the fair that we're at. And I think being her child, naturally, I probably see her as a nurturer, as a guide, as a sounding board, and then maybe finally as an inspiration. But I think that as I've evolved, as I've grown, as I've discovered what I want to do, as I've become more interested in doing social impact work, I think that inspiration has begun to rise to the forefront. I mean, we're at the Lagos Leather Fair. It's an event that's designed to make a change in an industry. And I feel like one of my primary callings is to make change, make social change. And so I think the alignment is happening more visibly for me and more internally. So maybe I am beginning to experience her more in the same way that the public does, just because I now have a model to follow. And a guide. And I'm lucky because I could ask her questions at home. But yeah, that's it.
And I'm going to stay with you for a second.
Okay.
For those in the audience who may not know, what are social programs designed to achieve, and why do they matter to the creative industry?
So social programs, I feel like it's like two big words that are kind of joined together and makes it sound super complicated. But essentially, it's anything that's designed to make a change in the industry. So ideally, lots of organizations are doing business. They're doing active work. They're doing the work that they would typically do. And ideally, social programs are those initiatives that are started often by organizations that are designed to create sustainable change. Sometimes it's done in partnership with grant donor-funded organizations. Sometimes you do it in partnership with other organizations in your space. But essentially, they are ideally initiatives that are designed to begin to ease challenges that organizations face. So whether it's things like unemployment or housing or even just environmental degradation, essentially they're the change agents that are started by organizations oftentimes, or even individuals. Typically, you kind of can do this you typically need to do it in partnership with similar organizations or organizations who face similar challenges and recognize that they may have a role to play in changing it. But I think it matters in particular for the creative industry because the creative industry is kind of like what I would call like it's a consistent cog in our lives. Fashion, music, housing, design, like it's so consistent, but I think it's often regarded as a secondary player in terms of actually driving change. People look to donor-funded organizations, they look to NGOs, they don't necessarily look to organizations that kind of feed the major parts of our lives. And I think that in that way, the creative industries are likely to maybe drive further change and potentially push things further because there are a lot of people kind of feeding off of the space on a consistent basis and feeding into the space on a consistent basis. So I think that's why they're important for the creative industries.
Okay, very much a driver of change in the creative industry, and the creative industry brings a lot to other communities. But also I see that there is a link, a community link. So the creative industry feeding into the rest of the business. Thank you so much. My dear Ache, how does social impact align with sustainability development goals in your creative space?
All right, thank you very much, Gilles, for the question. So at Mitimeth, we have established an artisan economy, and the artisan economy revolves around the transformation of natural fibers into lifestyle products like home decor and fashion accessories. And we're doing this by taking resources that we find in our immediate environment, actually environmental menaces. How do the goals tie into what we do? I can highlight at least five of the SDGs that are part and parcel of what we do at Mitimeth. So there's SDG 1, which has to do with no poverty. And what we're doing, we work a lot in rural communities, rural and peri-urban communities. And what we're doing there is, of course, the poverty levels are unimaginable. The things that we take for granted in the urban areas and, middle class, upper class are things that, they can only dream of. And maybe just to give you an example, using SDG 1 and what we're trying to do. We administered a survey in 2021, last year, amongst, 140 of our artisans in a particular location. And we asked them what their income expectations were. And across the 140, the total amount came to about 7.4 million naira. So on average, that's about 52,000 naira a year per artisan. Boil that down to a month, that is 4,500, 4.5K a month. That is their income expectation. So you now begin to understand what poverty is like, and they're not asking for too much, 4,500. Here in Lagos, we can spend that easily on a meal, or maybe half a meal, depending on which restaurant you go to. But those are the lives that we're impacting. We're giving them opportunities at that level to have skills to enable them to generate an income from working with natural fibers. Another SDG is SDG 5, which has to do with gender equality and gender parity. So we establish maker communities. They weave. And I believe that's a very gender-friendly occupation. It really does not require brute force, as long as you're interested in engaging your hands and your mind, you're more than able to embark upon this activity. So it's very gender-friendly, very age-friendly as well. We have grandmothers, we have youth that are engaged in this activity across board. And then another SDG is 8, which has to do with decent work and economic opportunity. We're not taking people out of their immediate environment, but we're actually creating opportunities for them within their local environment. So that reduces the need to migrate to the urban areas. We call it distress migration because of lack of opportunity. So what we're doing is we're creating those opportunities in situ and with the materials that they have around them. And then there's climate action, which is SDG 13. We're addressing an environmental problem. A good number of us here that are very familiar with the Lagos Lagoon know that at certain times of the year, there's this huge deluge of water hyacinth in the waterways. And that's what we're tackling. We're taking this environmental problem and actually transforming it into beneficial use. Typically in the rural areas, perhaps maybe not so in the urban areas, when water hyacinth invades farms, those that do lowland farming, the farmers simply just shove it aside, and then when it's dry, they burn it. So that contributes a lot to the air pollution. And then the plant is also very rich in methane, which is a potent greenhouse gas. which is not good for the atmosphere either. And then last but not the least is SDG 17, which has to do with strategic partnerships. Sinmi alluded to partnerships earlier, and I'm sure a number of us that are engaged in business know that business is not a solo journey. It's not a journey of one, but a journey of many. And Mitimeth is where it is today as a result of relationships and partnerships that we have cultivated with the private sector, the public sector, even with our artisans. That's a form of partnership as well. So, those are about 5. I'm sure there's several, there are others as well, but these are the key 5 that tie into the work that we do at Mitimeth.
Please put your hands together for the comments. And feel free to clap higher. I can't hear you. All right. Kanyinsade, and sorry if I don't pronounce your name well. What is your story? Why does it matter? And why should we hear it?
Okay, I find, first of all, thank you for the opportunity to be here to speak to you guys and also on the panel as well. I find that question quite difficult to answer because it sort of implies some level of self-acknowledgement of importance, right? But I'm an architect. I'm an architect by training, and I'm an architect in thinking and in execution. And why I think that really less about my story and more the story of architecture, why I think the story of architecture is important, is really because architecture, first of all, is the foundation of everything we see in society today, in my opinion. The buildings we live in, the places we interact in, the places we communicate in, and the places we live in general. So architecture basically provides that foundation for you. But I think that architecture, first of all, starts with thinking. And it's the thinking around humanity, I think, that helps or solves the problems of humanity. And so why I think it's important is really because the training that goes into design thinking has to be centered around compassion and compassion for each other, right? It has to be centered around, thinking about your fellow man and how the unique ability to influence a space must be, positioned to benefit the users of the space. And so what I do, I run an architecture firm called Seventh Space. And what we do alongside the standard architecture work is also try to, provide a solution to the housing deficit in Africa and hopefully in the entire world eventually. And how we do that is by repurposing, otherwise used building materials or materials that are not generally used for buildings. Right now, we're currently repurposing shipping containers and converting them into one-bedroom housing apartments that are mobile, sellable, scalable, stackable. Basically, we're trying to just decentralize or break apart what one person knows as a conventional building and break it into tiny components and make it more accessible to the general person. So that's the story. Why do I think it's important? We currently, especially in Nigeria, currently have a housing deficit of over 20 million houses. We have a production rate of about 250,000 houses a year. We're never going to be able to catch up with what we need if we continue building the way we build. And so the premise and the entire focus of my business and the people that I tend to partner with and work with is basically trying to put a dent in that number by figuring out a way to build houses quicker. And so using technology, using repurposed materials, and basically almost anything that's available to us, I think it's really about designing for the people and designing to make housing more accessible to people who do not, like she was saying, earn the right amount or the amount of money that we think a home should cost. So I think the whole point is, one, we produce on an assembly line, we get it out to the public as quickly as possible, and eventually when we scale, we can crash the price of housing to a place where we're talking about things like subscription housing, which is a lower form of rent. And we're talking about ways to bring housing just closer to people in general, make it more accessible to people.
Thank you very much. Thank you very much. Please recognize these speakers every time they speak, and that will keep you awake. We want you to be awake from now until the end. Thank you. Ache, I'm coming back to you. Is it realistically possible to achieve social good whilst doing business simultaneously?
Absolutely. And I also think that it's an imperative that we can't continue to do business as usual and think that that business is good. Sure, we've heard of, the triple bottom line, talking about people, planet, and profit, and Kanyinsade, alluded to some of that earlier. In order for us to do good business, we have to keep in consideration these three pillars. Those are the three pillars upon which good business stands. I think gone are the days, especially in Nigeria and especially across this continent, where we face so many pressing challenges. We have a very youthful population, in addition to that, high unemployment rates and the likes. We can't continue to think it's all about profits. We have to consider people, and we have to consider the environment as well. And an example that I would give is, it's easy for us to say, okay, we want to make a huge profit. And in order to make that huge profit, of course, we're looking at, the lowest cost of production possible. We look within our immediate environment and we can see that that is not happening. There are just so many challenges, infrastructural, skills, so many challenges. So the easy way out is for us to say, okay, we want to maximize our profit, so we're going to take this offshore. You take it offshore, yes, you've made good money, but is that really good business at the end of the day in the context of the local environment? Yes, you have fed people overseas, but you have not fed people locally. In fact, you have contributed to the unemployment problem. So the answer is, what do we need to do differently to ensure that the business that we do is good by empowering people locally to have the requisite skills to do good jobs so that we can do good business? And I'll use, Kafawa as a good example here, recognizing there's a dearth of skilled artisans within this industry. So how do you go about, building capacity? It's easy for you to say, I can ship this to Turkey, I can ship it to China, ship my production to China or Turkey, but that's not solving the problem locally. So what is the project doing? The project is building and upgrading skills locally so that we'll have a wider pool. Businesses would have a wider pool. Good businesses would have a wider pool to choose from. And by having that wider pool, you're creating additional employment opportunities, and you're also contributing to the growth of the economy and so on and so forth. So to answer your question, yes, it is possible. It's an absolute, it's imperative, but it takes time. So I think we need to recognize that this is a patient process. You're not going to be able to upgrade people's skills overnight. We're not going to be able to change the power situation overnight, and so on and so forth. So it takes time, and we just need to be patient in the process as we, take into consideration the people, the planet, and then profits. And ultimately, they all work together for good. They do not work in isolation. They all work together for good. So we always need to keep these three in mind and know that at the end of the day, if we do, we will definitely achieve our profit objectives.
Interestingly enough, the richest man on earth, and many people don't know that, is an African. The richest man on earth, not only in the past, Kanka Musa, but nowadays, the richest man on earth is an African man. His name is Elon Musk. And Elon Musk puts people, planet, and profit at the core of his business. Very interesting. So just rebounding on what you said, thank you. I'm gonna go to Sinmi. And Sinmi, what outcomes surprised you about the impact of the Kafawa project that you worked? And please give us a bit of a context.
Yeah, well, thank you for bringing that in actually quite nicely. So the Kafawa training program, for people who don't know, was an initiative started by my World of Bags in partnership with MasterCard Foundation. And the idea was there's a problem that an organization in the leather industry has been facing consistently, i.e. a lack of skilled manpower, what they call the missing middle. You want great products, but you don't necessarily have the individuals to make them happen. And I think it's a challenge that many organizations in the leather industry are facing, as exhibitors might attest to here. And so the idea with Kafao was that we would create that skilled manpower by upskilling young people in the necessary manufacturing skills that they needed. But I think more than that, it was also kind of looking at the problem of unemployment and saying, well, if you give people skills, you give them access to improved economic outcomes. And so I think the idea of Kafao is essentially kind of just, I guess, putting people first so that you might be able to make sustainable change that will affect the eventual outcomes and potentially create a ripple. I think what surprised me about Kafao was the ripple. I think, first of all, so I think it's easy to think that, okay, so there's a problem of unemployment, people need jobs. Like, you think about it as a very abstract thing. There are no jobs out there. But then when you create a program that says, we're going to upskill you for free, and you have thousands and thousands of people banging down your door, you then begin to see that, wait, this unemployment problem that we're talking about is quite tangible. It's not just people who are saying, oh yeah, well, I would like to do this for fun. It's people who are saying, I don't necessarily know how to make a living. I don't necessarily have the means. I don't have the education. And so I think that was one of the first surprises, that actually the problem is bigger than we possibly knew. And then I think, on the other hand, when I say the ripple, I think it was essentially, so, you give an individual access to a skill. I mean, you're putting them at a machine. It seems quite basic. You put them at a machine, they get better at it. But there's a ripple in terms of the self-confidence that they now have to go out into the world. The self-confidence that they now have to go out and say, I'm going to start my own business. I don't think I want you to employ me. And I think that shocked us, because we were like, we're going to give you access to work, so you're just going to go into available jobs. But these were people who came in at the beginning, who didn't necessarily know who they were or what they wanted to do, and left at the end kind of shrugging and saying, yeah, no, I don't need you. I'll give you my time if I want to, but I don't need you, because now they had more of themselves. They had kind of evolved into fuller human beings. And at the end of the day, again, it seems quite simple. You put a person behind a machine, you give them access to tools, you give them access to peers that they can connect with, who can inspire them, and then they go out there and start businesses. I mean, a few of them are actually here. Our emerging designers at Lagos Leather Fair are our Kafao graduates, which I think is phenomenal. Like, these are people who have, yes, that deserves a round of applause. Yeah, these are people who are starting out. Please patronize our emerging designers, by the way. But these are people who are starting out and going as confidently as possible in that, on that route. And I think, so those were ultimately the surprises, that we could, in fact, first of all, there was such a large problem. And second of all, that it could potentially be solved. I think it's easy, it's not completely solved, obviously, but I think it's easy to look at a problem and think, it's massive, it's too big. But we collaborated with individuals, we collaborated with organizations, we collaborated with individuals who were like our Kafao graduates, who were looking for opportunities, who were then empowered as a result to go on and do the same thing for other people. I think the ripple is currently bigger than we know. But I think that that's the most amazing thing about it, that we are yet to see the eventual outcomes from a lot of the things that were done, but that the little glimmers that we're starting to see are shockingly massive. So, I think it gives a lot of hope to it brings a lot of hope. So the problem is big, but there's a lot of hope, essentially.
Thank you, Sinmi. And I have a little story for you. Okay. Yesterday, before everybody came, I walked around and I went to one of your graduates. And he said to me, do you want this pair of shoes, which I thought was really beautiful? And I said to him, look, how much is it? And I said, well, in New York, it actually costs me less money. And what's the size? Do you have my size? No, I don't have it. He sees me today and he says, look, we can't actually do this for that price and we can build it to your foot. So I said, I promise I'll come. You can measure my foot, and you can get business. So really, congratulations. They are beyond just the technical skills. The human skills that you've given them are just tremendous.
Thank you.
Kanyinsade, is architecture part of the creative space? And I'm teasing you here, but because a lot of people think very often that it's not, and if so, why?
I think the short answer is yes, it is. But the reasons why I think it's part of the creative space is just by the definition of the word create, right? It literally sometimes means to bring to life. And the center focus of architecture is to bring an idea to life. So an idea you have in your head, the juxtaposition of the different parts of the idea, the addition of it, the mathematics that goes into it, which is what a lot of people get carried away with. But the thinking in itself is creativity. A lot of us appreciate buildings, and we also know when a building does not look good. And so there's an expectation subconsciously of architects as well to translate creativity to the expression in physical structures. So yes, it is. It is a part of the creative industry. In fact, I think it's, first of all, starts in the creative industry and then ends up in the scientific. And so we have the lucky opportunity to be able to, one, pull both parts together and then translate it into expression. So yes, it is.
And how does your work contribute to the positive impact on social, environmental things?
Well, I would say that, one, there's an ambition for the impact that we have to be much bigger than it is. And I think that will come to fruition at the end or towards the end of the exploration of our ideas. But it currently contributes to social impact in the sense that, first of all, the people who we are trying to provide housing for, the people who our design thinking is centered around, are people who are otherwise counted out of the process or counted out of expectation. And so, first of all, we work with a lot of artisans and a lot of, bricklayers and, other artisans and different vocations. So first of all, bring these ideas to life, right? So one, there's the human capital aspect of it, where there's a lot of communication to translate, whatever it is that's on paper to a physical structure. And then secondly, I think it's also in the broader social impact that we have. The choice of materials that we use in our buildings, I think beyond even the choice of materials, the general outlook, which is really to bring housing closer or to bring other professions to the limelight. As an architect, I haven't always only worked on housing. There's another company that was said in the bio called Duroy. And in 2017, we had run a program with Lagos State for organizers, for example. Those are people who pump your tires on the streets and pump your tires on the road. And the idea was the state had originally planned to, ban them and kick them off the road. And we decided to create something that would legitimize their trade. So we went about to Lagos State and we spoke to Lagos State and we were able to put forward a proposal which basically allowed us to create a self-sustaining structure that had a billboard that advertising could happen on. And that billboard sort of sustained the entire program. And so what happens is each organizer is given a location that's GPS mapped, giving a billboard and a container for the tool of their trade. And so each organizer, is recognized by the state, given legitimacy to stay at that location because the state knows exactly where they are. And then they are able to trade or practice their trade in a self and a controlled environment. So I don't know if anyone has seen any of those blue boxes that randomly are on the road. That was one of the initiatives. And I think that in that thinking process, you are able to include a lot more people who will otherwise have been looked out or looked down on in society into the revenue generating part of society, and an eventual feedback into sustainability of economies and governments and cities, because eventually taxation could happen, eventually they become higher income earners in society, and their contribution to society expands beyond the direct skill that they have.
And are most of the houses that you build on the low cost, or it's the whole range?
So we do work on the whole range, to be very honest. But the primary focus, I think, of the cargo-texture housing that we do is really driving towards low cost. It is kind of tough, especially with construction, to start by saying low cost because it's relative. Low cost is relative, but comparatively to what we have, it is more accessible and more affordable and within reach. Obviously, there's partnerships that are required with finance houses and banks and other industry specialists to be able to get to where we want to go to because of the challenges before us. But I think that we're well on our way. We're well on our way there.
Excellent. Thank you very much. So actually, you spoke about the impact by talking about the 5 SDGs. Now, how have you been able to establish both domestically and globally partnerships that have impact on your business and also on the social environments that you are working in?
Great. All right. So SDG 17 was one of those that I highlighted, strategic partnerships. Our journey, as I mentioned, has been a journey of several, and we've been very fortunate to have both domestic and international partnerships. And one thing that I can say, there's no, 1, 2, 3 prescription to achieving those partnerships, but just realizing that partnerships actually stem from relationships. And relationships take time, and you have to invest your time and resources in the relationship to make it work. It happens in our day-to-day relationships, and it also happens with partnerships. So to me, partnerships and relationships are almost like synonymous. And the way that it's happened for Mitimeth has been quite interesting, across board. So it's happened through networks, just joining the right networks and meeting the right people and cultivating the right relationships with those right people that one has come across. And I'll use an example, and I'll use an international example. 4 years ago, 2018, I joined an association called Trade Plus Impact. Actually, my organization joined the Trade Plus Impact Association. And the mandate of Trade Plus Impact is to connect leading social enterprises in Africa and the Middle East to buyers, to experts in the field, and to investors. So I joined the organization because we needed to connect with markets. I mean, we needed to find more buyers in order to sustain the maker communities that we have. So more business means, more wages or more income for our community of weavers. So I joined this organization, and nothing really happened. I mean, we had meetings, interactions, but there was no business that came out immediately. 2 years into my joining the association, this was 2020, during the peak of lockdown, I received one of these monthly newsletters. And in that newsletter was a survey. So it's very important. What I try to say is that if you join an association and they send you monthly newsletters, please take time to read them, because you never know whether there's something in that letter that's just for you. And it so happened that that particular letter was just for me. So I saw this survey, and it related to deploying technology within the handmade sector. And I had been banging my head against many walls, looking for an enterprise solution for Mitimeth. So I filled out the survey, and there was an email saying, if you want more information, send us an email. And I did. So I filled out the survey, and I sent out this email. And I said, I filled out the survey. I'm interested in a fit-for-purpose technological solution for Mitimeth. We're into manufacturing, we sell, and so on and so forth. So I get a message back saying, oh, thank you for filling out the survey. Let's schedule some time to meet. And the organization that reached out to me was Powered by People. So we had this conversation. They were super excited. I guess I was the first African or Nigerian enterprise I actually think I was the first African and only African enterprise to actually respond. As a result of that meeting, the lady said, would you be interested in being one of our beta testers for this solution? I was like, of course. So that is how we got drawn into testing this solution, which for us was the solution we were looking for. Now take that a step further. I guess I must have really connected with this lady, because she now gave my name to another organization called NEST. And NEST is a Guild of Artisans. They're actually based in New York. And their focus is on the handmade sector. They were interested in coming to Africa to introduce a compliance program which had done very well in other parts of the world except Africa. They hadn't come to Africa. So she dropped my name. They reached out. They said, you're one of 3 enterprises in sub-Saharan Africa that we would like to participate in this survey. So partnerships do have an add-on effect, a ripple effect, talking about ripples right here. So from PBP, no, from TNI, I moved to Powered by People, now to NEST. And interestingly, we just went through our site assessment. They actually came from the US and Spain to assess Mitimeth last May to ensure that, our processes were top-notch and that they could easily, they could give us their seal and, buyers like West Elm would be interested in what we're doing. So we've just gone through the process. We're waiting for the certification. Then thirdly, the same PBP dropped our name with a design organization based in Eastern Europe. So they were intrigued with what we're doing. We just had a conversation. Oh, this is what you do? Yes, we'll send you this survey, fill it out. I filled it out. They're like, would you be interested in being one of our artisan groups? We're going to support you with design support. So we had a designer from Italy actually come in February to meet with the team, and we're designing a collection. So the summary of what I'm trying to say is that, partnerships do not happen accidentally. They're very intentional. You have to nurture those relationships, take advantage of organizations that are like-minded and that will help you further your objectives and goals. And that's essentially what we did with this one example with Trade Plus Impact. And now we have 4 partnerships on board. So those are some of the things that we've done. We've participated in business plan competitions. And interestingly, I don't know if Fumi is still here. I just met a UWIN awardee that I hadn't seen since 2013 or 14. But again, that's another way in which you cultivate relationships and ultimately partnerships evolve. But it involves your time and it involves resources as well.
Wow, very interesting stories. And please, go ahead. I can't hear you. and it reminds me of a conversation that was in a previous panel about the importance of partnership, community working together, and this African proverb of alone you can go fast, together we can go far. Thank you. I have another question for you. I'm going to keep you on the mic. What led you to embark into this specific field that you're working in, which has some correlation with what Kanyinsade is doing? And tell us your story and why you do the stuff that you do.
So for me, I'm not going to go through my bio again, but I made a leap. So I used to be in the corporate sector. I actually have a STEM background. I'm a computer scientist. But now today I'm in the creative sector. So I made a leap. And what made me make this leap, it's a long story, but the Reader's Digest version is this. I saw an environmental problem. And what was this environmental problem? I came all the way from Ibadan. And I was on the 3rd mainland bridge and saw water hyacinth infestation. And that was my spark moment, like they say, because I saw the water hyacinth and then I saw boats that were supposed to be moving on the water, but instead were hemmed in. So that set the ball rolling in terms of, I think this is a problem. But even with this problem, I think there's an opportunity that's just waiting to be explored. And so I started doing research on, water hyacinth, because my goal then was we have to find a solution to this problem. These boats need to be out, and the people need to be plying their trade, and we need to do something with this natural plant, with this natural plant fiber that we have here. So it was all about solving an environmental problem and a social as well, because if fishing boats are meant to be out and people are meant to be fishing and they're not, that means that their livelihoods have been hampered. And then it also had to do with, okay, so if their livelihoods have been hampered, can we look at alternate livelihoods by taking this environmental menace and then transforming it into a means of generating income? So that essentially was the genesis. That's what led me into this field 11 years ago. So we're 11 years strong, and it's all about people. So we've talked about people quite a bit. For me, it was like, the riverine communities, how are they surviving, with their livelihoods, with their lives essentially being disrupted by the infestation of this water hyacinth. And for those of you that go on YouTube, there's a brilliant documentary that was done by Bolaji Alonge called Greener Pastures, where he takes us on a journey within the coastal communities of Lagos for us to understand the plight of water hyacinth infestation. And it's a huge problem. So for me, it was like, let's take this and create an economic opportunity out of it. And for us to tell our own story. So it's like, let us create our own solutions locally, with local hands, local minds. So we're not looking to the outside for solutions, but we're actually creating our own solutions inside and taking them to the outside. So that was a big motivation, that we must tell our story. We must tell our story not just in Nigeria, but beyond Nigeria. And interestingly, this water hyacinth problem is not a Nigerian problem. It's a global problem. So 44 out of the 54 countries on the continent are plagued by it. So if we can replicate this solution across, the other 43 countries, we'll be all the better for it. And we can only begin to imagine the economic impact that it would have on the communities, the maker communities that are established as a result of, creating a lifestyle company or lifestyle enterprises that work with these natural fibers.
Such rich and inspirational stories. I could listen to you for forever.
And I could go on forever, so I'm going to stop right here.
Kanyinsade, if there was one thing that could really benefit the creative space and provide a huge social impact, what would it be?
Does it have to be one thing?
Well, I'll give you 2 or 3.
Okay. First of all, I want to just dovetail off what Ache said earlier concerning African solutions for African problems. So I think that's really my one thing, if I'm supposed to say it. I think that my one thing is centered around us creating solutions for ourselves. Usually, as Africans, we tend to import solutions that are created for a different environment, created for a different culture, created for a different mindset, and even just a way of expression. And so I think generally just trying to galvanize the scale and the scope of experiences and bringing them to focus on solving our own problems. I think that there's a unique way that Africans approach situations. And I think that in harnessing that uniqueness, one, we understand ourselves, right? There are certain things that happen in Lagos that you understand just because you are a Lagosian. We understand ourselves in a more inherent way than I think the Western world understands us. I feel like they come to try to impose. We can come to solve our problems by looking inwardly. And then if I'm going to add a second thing, I touched on it earlier, my second thing is compassion in thinking. I really think that a human-to-human focused ideology where we are thinking about the other person when we're trying to do what we're trying to do is really what I think would move the needle in the direction that we need to go. And I think that a lot of times when we talk about sustainability and we talk about, accessibility and bringing things closer to the people, there is, I think sometimes in my own opinion, an imagination that we're trying to solve problems to keep Africans poor. So how do we bring the solution closer to the ground so that it's more accessible? I think that the overall mindset is to elevate Africa such that we can access all solutions across board, but better still, solutions we created for ourselves, for our own unique problems.
Excellent. Thank you so much. Yeah, it deserves a round of applause. Please go ahead. I'll come back to you with a couple of questions. But Sinmi, what's next? The programs you've spoken about are very inspiring. The Kafaya program and its outcome, which we can see here, is very inspiring. What is next for Kafaya or other social impact projects that you may have?
So I think it's that feels like a trick question, to be honest. I mean, to be honest, what we did was a pilot. So what's next is probably the actual program. With the Kafaya pilot program, what we were saying was, is it possible to upskill an individual and give them access to improved economic outcomes? I think that the pilot said the answer is yes. And so we're trying to take our yes and make it a lot bigger. We're trying to roll out a program that essentially goes beyond a single state, goes nationwide, first of all. And I think it's also even beyond Kafaya, which we're amazingly inspired by. I think we're standing inside of a social program, right? We're standing inside of an initiative that is designed to move an industry forward. And I think what's next is, for us, hopefully, and then hopefully it's for other organizations, what's next is essentially saying, here's how I can make a change by doing what I do anyway. Here's how I can make a difference by doing what I do anyway. And here's how I can better look at problems and potentially make them bite-sized. So we are going to keep working on making Kafaya real. I know so many people, I feel like there's so many people in this room who are waiting to hear the answer of like, oh, when is it actually starting? I can't give that answer. But I think that it's bound to be extremely exciting because we've learned a lot. I think we have a better understanding of people. We have a better understanding of the people that we are designing a program like this for, which is why pilots are good. And I guess for anyone who's seeking out a way to establish a social program in an organization, I would say always start with a pilot so you work through the kinks. I think that we've learned a lot as individuals. We've learned a lot about what needs to be done. But I think also there is a necessary flexibility to answering the question of what's next, i.e., so we know what we want to happen, and we believe we know what the problem is, but I think that there's always a need to kind of revisit how we're looking at the problem, like revisit our understanding of the problem. So we say the problem is, people don't actually have access to employment opportunities. Is that the problem? I mean, I think you have to keep revisiting that question so that you can actually see and keep digging deeper. I think that the evolution of that problem will decide on the what's next. I'm not saying that right now there isn't an unemployment problem, but I'm saying in order to design a solution that is inherently sustainable, you would need to keep digging deeper into like the root causes of the problem. We're looking forward to learning more. We're looking forward to growing, expanding. We're looking forward to partnering with so many more organizations who do similar things, but we're also looking forward to kind of creating, and I'm going to keep saying ripple, but creating a ripple in the sense that other organizations should go away and do this. Other organizations should go away, small, medium, large, should go away and seek out ways to design solutions. We're all facing challenges. We're in Nigeria. Like, it's not an easy country. We're all facing challenges, but I think the idea is that if an organization can potentially look at a problem in a deeper way and look at a problem with a little bit more more of a solution-driven approach, then ideally you can begin to tailor your business model, tailor your solutions, your offerings to solve that problem. I think it's possible, and ultimately, I guess my point is the what's next is beyond us a little bit.
Thank you so much. You're warming up. We're warming up. In a few minutes, we'll come to you and ask you questions, so start thinking about them. But just one more thing, a fact. How many people were touched by the Kafaya program?
So I can give you a number, but the number is probably much bigger. Okay. Again, because we're talking about the ripple, right?
Yes.
So we had over 500 trainees in our pilot program. Honestly, we were aiming for like 150.
Yeah.
Like we really were, because we were saying it's a pilot. We just want to see what happens. But again, when people are banging down your door, you don't want to keep turning them away.
Yeah.
So you want to keep finding a way to better understand why people are banging down your door and how the problem can serve them. So 500 at base level trainees, but there were partners, there were partner organizations. I mean, even think about just the vendors who provide spaces for you to do these things, the vendors who provide the materials, the tools. Lots and lots of people are kind of evolving as a result of this program. So I guess my answer is I don't know, but I think it's much bigger than we know.
Indeed, indeed. And you inspired people who are now going to become entrepreneurs or have become entrepreneurs already.
Yeah, exactly.
Ache, what does design thinking mean to you, and how could it be useful to improve communities that you work with?
Interestingly, I think Kanyinsade touched a lot on it as he was talking about human-centered design. So for Mitimeth, it's putting people making people the focus of the solution that you're providing. So it starts from a point of empathy. And for me, if I think of how Mitimeth started, it was from a point of empathy. So it was looking at this picture, a very live picture, and saying to myself, my goodness, livelihoods have been affected. What can we do to change this situation? How can we tackle this environmental menace and create livelihoods in the process? Make this a win-win situation for the environment and win-win for the community. So it started from a point of empathy. And then also understanding, why is this a problem in the first place? So you have communities whose lives have been disrupted, cannot continue life as usual because of the presence of this weed. And we've interviewed community after community. So it's not just, me sitting in Ibadan, and, dreaming up, what potential solutions are, but actually talking to the people and finding out, is this thing a problem? And why is it a problem? And in fact, when we go out for our trainings, I mean, that's the first thing we start with. What is this? What does this mean to you? And 99, in fact, 100% of the time, people are like, this thing, for the Yorubas here, I mean, we've been to communities where they're like, a war, as in this is an abomination, you don't even touch it. So there were several myths surrounding the presence of this weed. So it's, trying to understand what people's perceptions are, and then attempting to now change those perceptions with the solution that you're about to proffer. So we understand people can't, take their boats out. Children can't go to school because of the presence of this weed. Okay, what if we harvest it? And then we now start weaving these stems into rope that can be used for rugs. It can be used for furniture. And then you earn an income from it. So understanding what the needs are. So there's unemployment, people need money. Let's create an economic opportunity from this. And then also evaluating the options. So I looked at our environment and the numerous challenges or opportunities it presents to us. So I'm like, okay, if we're going to work within a riverine community, we better not be thinking of a solution that requires power. We better not be thinking of a solution that requires a lot of capital, equipment. So it had to be something that was labor intensive, and we've been blessed with a huge population, and it was just, you have to go for a labor intensive, a solution that requires labor versus capital or technical expertise. And so that's why out of the different options that I researched, I zeroed in on handicrafts. Biogas was a good alternative, and we could do with biogas because we need power, but it will also require huge technological intervention, which I know the communities are not prepared for. We just don't have that kind of expertise in these communities. So it's understanding, okay, what are the options and what is best suited for these communities? So I zeroed in on the handicrafts option. And then testing. Okay, so you've made these handicrafts, are they going to sell? And for me, it wasn't just about, weaving a basket, but it was the story behind the basket. So this is not a rattan basket. It's not a wicker basket. It's a water hyacinth basket. And why is this so important? Because we have taken out X number of stems from the waterways to create access, and we've engaged the community to weave this basket. So they're now earning an income from a free natural resource in their environment. And so testing those assumptions, taking it to the market and seeing how people respond. And the very first place I took products to was AFAC, which is the African Arts and Culture Expo in Abuja. So I took it out there and I made sales of less than 10,000. It didn't even cover my transport from Ibadan to Abuja. But I left there elated, not deflated, but elated, because I said, whoever, these customers, 2 of them that were willing to part with their money, obviously bought into this story. Now, of course, our products have evolved over the years. In fact, I look at the products that I took, because I still have samples, right, of what I took to the market back then, and I cringe. I'm like, oh my goodness, look at the nails. But we've gotten better. We've gotten better over the years. But all I needed was that validation from the marketplace that, yes, people are willing to buy. So again, looking at the customer as well, who are the people that are interested in this, having them in mind as you're creating it. Because the truth of the matter is, my maker communities are not my customers. They are not my customers. My customers are in the mid to upper class. But the mid to upper class are paying, the wages of, the maker communities. And that's essentially it from a human-centered design, keeping people at the focus and creating solutions that they can run with and people are willing to part money for.
The theme keeps coming throughout the conversations about helping human beings, people, come out of poverty, giving them the means, the skills to be able to stand on their 2 legs and go forward. We're coming to an end. We've got about 3 minutes to finish. So I'm going to ask you one question to all of you. So I'm going to start with you, Sinmi. How and why is your work transformational? And it's the same question I'm going to ask to each one of you as your final message to our audience.
I mean, I feel like I've said it, but I'm going to try and say it again. Ultimately, I think it's, okay, so actually maybe it's bigger than that. It's transformational for the people who do the work, and it's transformational for the recipients of the work, the beneficiaries. So obviously for the beneficiaries, it might seem quite obvious. You're giving people access to opportunities that they want, that they're opting into. You're giving them a space to exist, to thrive. You're giving them platforms that they previously may not have had. You're giving them an understanding of themselves, of their potential evolution, changing their thinking, changing their mindsets, allowing them to see, I think, to be honest, sometimes it's just allowing them to see. And I mean, I think that we had a lot of people who came onto the program and who you would ask, what would you like to do when you leave here? And they just couldn't fathom it, I mean, I know I came here because I wanted a skill, but really now I have to think about, but then they left with dreams. And I think that's quite clear. But I think for the people who work on it, it's a new way to kind of look at, first of all, to look at problems, but I think it's also a new way to look at people and look at how people can be best served. I think everybody's, again, touched on this, how people can be best served, and how people can, and how I think it's transformational for us in ways that I think that we're also partly yet to see because we're still working on this, but I think it's giving us an innate understanding of human beings that I think we previously did not necessarily have. And I think that it's, in a beautiful way, it's beautiful that it started with a problem, because ideally it's almost as though you're partnering with the beneficiaries to create their own future outcomes without necessarily knowing it, which I think is fantastic. So, I mean, the transformation continues, but as we stand, I think it's exciting to see what the possibilities could be.
Thank you very much. Same question to you, Kanyinsade.
Okay, so we look at, first of all, we try to take into account the full life cycle of what we do. So I think that it's been transformational in 3 different levels. One, the environment, right, and how we interact with our environment. A lot of our solutions, in both companies that I'm part of, first of all, think about the environmental impact of what we provide. So in the case of cargo texture housing or modular housing, we're basically looking at low impact houses, basically houses that do not require brick and mortar and not necessarily taking out of the environment, and predominantly houses that are modular and movable. So for better context, we're allowing people to be able to access the real estate market in a very different way. So because our houses are modular and movable houses, and I don't mean mobile in the sense that they move every day, but they can be moved should you need to move them, it allows people to rent land rather than purchase land. We have an issue in Lagos State, say for example, let's use Lekki for example, Lekki phase 1 that we're in. A lot of people own land. There are over 700 empty plots of land. They're all owned but unutilized within the city centers. People are holding that land for future benefits, appreciation, and value. What we're saying to those people and how it's transformational for them is without selling your land, you can generate revenue on that land. Then we go to our clients and our end users and we're saying, you can live in Lekki without buying land in Lekki. And so essentially what we're doing is we're bringing the market closer to people. So environmentally, we're solving that problem and hopefully it's transformational. Now on the individual level, right, we're basically, as I've said earlier in these conversations, bringing accessibility of homes, not just in the ability to own a home, but in the location you live in. A lot of us want to live in locations that are closer to our place of work. The place of work is usually centered in the city center, and we have a huge transportation problem. So it's transformational from that aspect because we're bringing it and trying to make it more accessible. On the artisan level as well, it's transformational because we're giving them more work. We're giving them a different type of work to do. We're expanding their technical skills because we're not doing construction using brick and mortar. We're using construction using metal and steel and other things. So where welders were maybe resigned to just maybe adding a part of the building, in our industry, they become the focus of the building process. And then finally, I would say for us as the solution provider, it's been transformational because we've had the opportunity to ask questions that we've never been able to ask. And I think that that's the center of it. Rather than coming to the public with a solution that you have probably spent a lot of time ruminating over, you touched on that as well. You're coming with questions because you can't know everything. In fact, at best, all you know is what you've thought about. And they're usually people who have experienced things that you haven't experienced, who are different pain points from what your solution is providing. And sometimes you might find that A and B are really not the solutions that they need, but usually a C. And sometimes I think that helps us in the evolution of our thinking, helps us in the evolution of our design process, and hopefully in the eventual outcome or solution that we provide. I think that's
excellent. Thank you very much, Kanyinsade. And you, Ache, as a final point.
Okay, it's been transformational in the sense that, when we talk about MODERTED, we say, we're transforming communities and the environment one plant fiber at a time. So essentially, we've changed the narrative. So we aren't there yet in terms of everybody across the country knowing that, yes, there's some beneficial use that can come out of water hyacinth, and a solution is handcrafts, and there's an enterprise called Mitimeth pioneering that. But we've gone far. I mean, our voice has been amplified. So we've changed the narrative. And we've also changed the narrative in the sense that, there's good handmade work that is coming out of Nigeria, right? And is coming out of the continent. So to me, I think that is transformation, especially when you hear of the other types of narratives that are out there. So it's transformational in that sense. And then for the people that we work with, I'll give you an example of a number of our artisans when we started did not have bank accounts. So they'll do work, they'll send it to us, and then they'll send us somebody else's account number, and they'll say, pay into this account. And, when the numbers, the number of artisans were few, yes, it was doable. But we now encouraged them. We said, we can't be liable if we put money in somebody's account and they don't give it to you. Go and open an account. And then we put a limit. We said, if you're going to earn more than 2,000 naira for this particular job, you have to have an account. So that encouraged people to open accounts. So when you talk about, banking the unbanked, we have seen that transformation take place. And then it was even taken to another level where we looked at the demographics and we thought that 70% of our artisan population were female and then 30% male. And then we had this training last year and there were only 2 males. So we're like, what happened here? What happened to the other males that, whose names? And I started listing them, that this person's definitely a male, etc. And the project managers, there are no males. So we dug deeper, asking questions, what is going on here? And realized that the women were given their husbands' account numbers and their brothers' account numbers or sons' account numbers. So we now had to go through this process of educating them to build their own credit record and so on and so forth. So transformation has taken place at that level where now 100% of 140 plus, 150 plus artisans are banked. So they have their own bank accounts, starting from, the youth to the grandmothers. So it's been transformational in that sense as well. And it continues, it evolves, just like Sinmi said, it continues. Continues.
Thank you very much, Atri. Ladies and gentlemen, give it up for our experts. We've been 3 minutes above time, so we have been very good on that way because you didn't even give me any signs. You were giving signs to everybody else. Thank you. So, ladies and gentlemen, we have now 15 minutes for questions and answers. I see one question here. I see one question here. We'll probably have time to take 3 at the most. If there's somebody else and another one here, and maybe we'll go to 4 depending on how in-depth these questions are being asked. Do we have more time? There are lots of... Okay. Can we have the mics? We'll start with the lady in the back, and then we'll go to the lady over there in the back, the gentleman and this gentleman, and we'll finish there, okay? Sorry for the others. You can come and see us after.
Okay, good afternoon or good evening, everyone. My questions goes to all the panelists. Okay, my first question is,
One question.
Okay, just one question to capture everything. Says that, can a small business, like a starting business, also consider social impact? Okay, so I'm going to ask my question in this way, that I'm a small business owner and I'm passionate about girls or women in the society that wants to have to sleep maybe with men to get some change, and I want to help them. Like if they have some skills, they probably would not be doing that. But I'm just a startup as well. So I want to know, should small business owners consider social impact? If yes, how? If no, when should they consider? That's my question.
Let's take the other questions.
Okay. Thank you very much, everyone. I would like to give a very big appreciation to the panelists. It's been a great one so far. Job well done. My question goes to Sinmi, Olayebi. In fact, when I saw the Kafara program online, I was like, wow, this is stating the obvious. This is speaking the silence, especially for those of us that are in the industry. We lack a huge number of emphasis on skilled leather artisans, and sometimes we do not even get to meet up with demand because we can't afford to just bring just anyone on board. But then, when you were talking about it, I was so interested on if you were able to get the solution. But it seems as though we are still on the border, like, I understand. What is the way forward? Because truly, for us to be able to, get up to that demand, for us to be able to meet up with that demand, for us to say that, yes, so we truly want to export, want to do that, we need enough numbers. We need numbers. I realized that instead of us to be in tens, tens, we are one all over. So how exactly do we actually actualize that dream of, getting more leather artisans on board and, have them work with a brand? We have
skilled ones here, skilled ones here. Not like everybody just really wants to start up something. You don't even know the way forward.
Thank you.
Yeah, good evening. Thank you for the conversation. It's been interesting. My question is, can you do good, make social impact in the context of this conversation with a capitalist mindset? By capitalist mindset, I mean you want to maximize profits. I imagine a school proprietor setting out to establish a school. Of course, the manifest reason is because I want to affect life, but the latent, hidden reason is just because I need to make some cool cash. So can you achieve or make social impact with that kind of mindset? Thank you.
Thank you. And there is one last question here, this gentleman.
Yes, I'm very grateful to Femi Bax for all she has been doing. I have been attending this leather fair since inception, since 2017, and I own a shoemaking outfit in Ibadan. One of the trainees at the bag making class, the second class, 2018. So what I want to ask is, do you have any plan for those that had passed through you, maybe in using them to train some other people, or to be of benefit along the line of the social impact that you are doing? Because I see pictures of the Kafawa trainings, the people you are using. Like me, I have interest in having impact, making social impact like you are focused on as well. It's not all about money, but to impact lives. Even if I get money from the training, it might not be too much, but I just want to give out my knowledge to train people. So, like the bag making class, I'm thinking of a situation whereby you maybe call us together again and evaluate us, and maybe look for the advantage you can gain from us, maybe in training new sets, I don't know. Then there was a time you are doing this COVID-19 nose masks. I got to know, and I told some of my friends, I told my tailor, his shop was visited. My sister-in-law, in fact, they came to my house. I was there that day when your representative came. She displayed her expertise, the skills, and some other friends like that were tailors. But them was called to make the nose mask. I learned that you gave it out to maybe an established fashion designer. I don't know. So I'm just asking, how would people that are just starting up like that gain from your social impact initiative, maybe along the line of the production? Thank you.
Okay, Sinmi, I suggest we start with you. There are at least two questions there.
Yeah.
If you need me to remind you of one,
I think I'll start with the last one.
Yes.
So that was like 3-4 questions. So I think maybe that's, first of all, it's okay to want to make money. Like, you can say that you want to train and make money. I don't think that there's anything wrong with that. But yes, to answer your question about whether or not there is a possibility for people who have gone through the program to become our partners, absolutely yes. And I think we have some of our team in this room. One of the things that we want to do, and I'm going to keep saying Ripple, one of the things that we want to do is to create room for people who we have trained to go out and essentially become smaller cells of the Kafawa training program. The Kafawa training program is not My World of Bags and MasterCard Foundation. The Kafawa training program is the people who have been trained, and it's ultimately about what they go on to do. And so, yes, some of our future plans are actually very much slanted towards how we can create silos of smaller groups, smaller cells of individuals, kind of supporting each other, building on each other's skills, and just having us more so as like in the backdrop a little bit more, as people do go on to help improve other people's skills. Naturally, it might mean that there's a longer lead time for some of the impact that we want to see. And definitely it might require our participation and our partnership for a while, just in terms of ensuring that the standard of training remains the same and remains what we have made it to be. But it's definitely something that we're very interested in. So I think that answers the first one. And then with regards to Project Safe Up and partnering with established brands, I'm putting that in quotes because Project Safe Up, for those who don't know, is a program that My World of Bags also did in partnership with MasterCard Foundation. And the idea was actually it wasn't the idea, we did it. We made over 2.5 million items of PPE and gave it out across the entire Southwest. But our producers were extremely small businesses. They were one-woman, one-man teams in small shops who then collaborated with other small businesses. Yes, there was a need to partner with some established brands to create templates that other small brands could follow, that micro enterprises could follow. But I mean, I can't say what happened with your sister and your friend, but the thing about it is ultimately quality is paramount. And again, in a pandemic, right, you want to make a mask that actually keeps somebody from catching COVID. So there was never any like personal feelings involved. It was very much looking at the quality of the work that was done. But I mean, I think ultimately, I think it was a good way for even the people who we went and tested to see what they needed to improve. So I do think that there was a win for people like that who were not necessarily selected. I think that answers that question, yeah. And then...
About the other question, it was aimed at you, but I think it's a question that anyone can answer.
Okay.
They said, can a small business consider social impact? Should some small business SMEs consider social impact? If yes, how?
So was that the question from the lady
Yeah.
in the stripe? Yeah, I think, no, it was, okay. I don't think that was directed at me, really. I think it was directed at everyone. Yeah. Obviously, I think the answer is yes, because I think My World of Bags still sort of considers itself, it's not a small business, but it considers itself on the upward track from small, right? I think that small businesses should ideally consider social programs because you are going to face problems. And ultimately, the idea is that you don't look at those problems as simply problems, but you look at them as opportunities. So there's this thing they call the SWOT matrix, strengths, weaknesses, opportunities, and threats. I think sometimes if you sit long enough in your threats, the opportunities begin to materialize. And sometimes it doesn't have to be a big thing. You don't have to be solving the problem. I mean, the problem you're illustrating is quite, I don't want to simplify it, but the deeper you begin to understand it, you will find that there are small enough ways to begin to do it, whether it's by hiring, whether it's by partnership, whether it's by the, like the kinds of people you occasionally donate products to. Like, I think the harder you look at the problem, and you look at the threats, and the better that small businesses look at the threats that they face, I think it becomes imperative to kind of consider social impact. So I would say I don't think that being a startup counts as that in any way. I don't think it counts as that in any way. Basically, I think that ultimately it's a good way to kind of differentiate your brand and potentially seek out partnerships. Indeed. I think that was the question.
Yeah, and I also want, if I could just add to what Sinmi has said. I mean, you don't necessarily look at it in isolation. What exactly is it that you want to do? So we've talked about design thinking, human-centered design. You're starting from a point of empathy. You've looked at a particular group of people, and you feel that if they had alternatives, they won't be doing what they're doing. So you're starting from a point of empathy, but you have to move beyond empathy to say, okay, what exactly are their needs? So you might be thinking that this is what their needs are, but when you talk to them, they might tell you something that's completely different. So you need to understand the needs of the people that you want to create this solution for. And then start to ideate. Think of what the possible solutions would be, come up with a prototype, and then test your prototype in the marketplace, whether it's a service or a product. But you need to go through those different stages, and in the process of going through those stages, you'll be able to flesh out a very robust solution, which ultimately has social impact.
And I'm going to let you answer the last question. You may want to build on this, but I'll let you answer the last question also. And if anybody else wants to chip in, feel free. Can you make social impact with a capitalistic mindset?
I think, first of all, the answer is yes. I think the answer is yes, but I'm a little careful about the word capitalist mindset because you also said make maximum profit. And I think that there has to be a little bit of a trade-off between profitability and social impact. because a lot of businesses, in my own experience and understanding, have to make that trade-off, because maximum profit, as you said earlier, means cutting expenses to the lowest level possible. However, with social impact, you're thinking about human beings first, and it doesn't necessarily mean cutting profits to the lowest means possible. It sometimes might mean making more difficult decisions in carrying out your business. And as was said earlier in this, on this panel, it's people, planet, profit. If you think about it in that order, then it's easy for you to be a profit-making business while, achieving social impact in whatever industry that it is that you do. But quickly, I would just want to, maybe just add a little bit of encouragement to the small businesses in the house here. I think that it's a lot easier as a small business to start planning for social impact than it is for a big business. Before the bureaucracy and all the red tape comes into place, you can factor that into your process now. And so the little bit of encouragement is start what you want to do. I think that starting it by asking questions before proposing your solution is probably the best way to do it. So go about, meet the people that you want to solve the problems for, and speak to them, find out what their pain points are, and tailor your business solution around their pain points, rather than thinking about it as, I want to solve a problem for you, what do I need to do? They might be the solution to their own problem. You just need to engage them long enough to pull out that solution from them. I don't know if that answers that.
Give it up for them. Thank you very much. Sinmi, Ache, Kanyinsade, it's been a pleasure, and I want to thank you and thank the organizer for a fantastic day here. I know you have another question, but we are off questions. If you want your question answered, just come in and see us afterwards. Thank you very much, everybody, for listening to us, and thank you again. Thank you.